The dark side of having goals when it comes to language learning, particularly. Hi guys, my name's Lamont. Welcome to Days of French and Swedish. It's a channel about language learning, so if that's something you're interested in, hang around and subscribe. Now, goals are a funny thing because I think that most people lump them in with all this kind of self-help, self-development stuff, which most people actually consider to be a bit of hocus pocus garbage, right? And they don't actually do it. So most people don't have goals. That is true. If you surveyed people, and they have surveyed people, people do not have goals. The funny thing about goals is they work. This is how I've heard it said. If you do not have goals, you will end up working for someone who does, right? Obviously that comes to career things. That applies to career type things. If you don't have goals, you'll end up working for someone who does. But it follows that if goals work, then we should have them for as many possible things as is feasible in our lives. We should try to apply goals to almost everything that it's actually applicable, and that includes language learning. I have only started taking goals seriously this year, to be honest. And like I said, they work. I have goals with regard to this channel, with regard to both my YouTube channels actually, and also with regard to my language learning. But there is a dark side of having goals. The dark side of having goals, when it comes to language learning particularly, is that we tend to set them way too high. And I'm going to get into why that is a little bit later. But another thing we tend to do, and especially with language learning, this is so potent with this one, we tend to set them for things that we cannot directly affect. What do I mean by that? I saw someone comment on Lydia, the language mentoring lady, I can't say her last name. I saw someone comment on her Learn 20 minute a day challenge, learn 20 min a day, hashtag learn 20 min a day. Anyway, I saw someone comment on that they had a New Year's resolution for 2019 that they were going to become fluent in Chinese. And as soon as I saw that, I went, and you didn't, did you? And that's not to show disrespect to that person or anyone who sets language learning New Year's resolutions, but what is that as a goal? It's not something that you can directly affect. Now, a lot of people have these kinds of goals, if you want to call them that, which I don't really call them that. What is fluency in the thing? That's the first problem. No one has a proper definition of what fluency is. But even if your goal is to reach, say, a B2 level or an N2 in Japanese or some level kind of goal like that, and you would think, well, that's direct enough, isn't it? No, it's not. You can affect how much time you spend on Japanese or on Chinese or on French. You can affect how much time you spend. You can affect what activities you do. But the idea of having a certain level that you're like, I want to get to that level, the problem is your brain doesn't really know what to do with that. The steps are too far removed from what you're supposed to do. I'm going to have to go into some detail here, but I promise I'm getting to a point that I think is worth making. This is something that more technical kind of people in marketing and that kind of business stuff, call a lead indicator versus a tail indicator. That is, how can you see whether you've reached the goal of being fluent in Chinese? You can only see that after you've done or not done the thing, right? You cannot see as it's happening. So you need to set up what is called a lead indicator. That is something that you directly affect. For example, I'm going to spend 1 hour a day on Chinese for the whole year, 365 hours a year. Now, it doesn't need to be that high. It doesn't need to be anything in particular, but it needs to be something that you can directly affect, you can actually do, and then you've done the thing, whether or not you've reached that other goal of being fluent in Chinese. You shouldn't even have that goal. That shouldn't come into it. What should be there is how much time you're going to spend or activities you're going to do. For example, I'm going to do a chapter of this book, but I myself, I love the time one, because when you've done the time, you know you've done it. There's no argument as to whether you've done your half an hour a day. You've got 1 day to do the time in that language. 1 day. That's a perfect example of a very early lead indicator. Did you do the time or didn't you? If you didn't, then you didn't meet the goal. If you did, then you did meet the goal. It's that simple. Whereas when you've got, say, a chapter of a textbook a week, you can theoretically get to Saturday, if that's what you call the last day of the week, and do the whole chapter. You didn't really reach the goal in the way that you were supposed to if you did that. And the other thing is your brain has a hard time activating that for you, going, that's what I'm doing, right? Whereas half an hour a day, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, as in obviously it does matter what you're doing, but if your brain just has the thing of, I'm doing half an hour a day and that's it, then that is so easy for you to say, okay, here I'm doing it, I've done it, okay, goal achieved, next day, goal achieved, next day, goal achieved. That is a lead indicator. A tail indicator is the level you've reached. Did I get to N2 in Japanese? But we can't affect that, it's too late, it's at the tail, that's why it's called that. Did I become fluent in Japanese is only a question of did I meet all the lead indicators. Now, I don't like talking in this kind of very management business style way, but it really is a good way to think about it. Is something an indicator that you can say, right, I am doing that and I'm doing it every day, or is it something that you can only measure after it's happened? Because after it's happened is not really good, because you can only then do it again the next time. You can't change it that day. You can't change it as it's happening. And if we make these two mistakes, like many people do, that is, they set their goals too high and they set them about levels that they want to reach that can only be measured later and not directly affected at the time, then they almost inevitably fail to reach those goals and they tend not to make goals again. I was thinking about the idea of being loftily humble and humbly lofty. Now, I know that's probably not going to help the non-native English speakers very much. I just mean setting your goals high enough that they will feel good if you've achieved them. Because if you set them so low that it doesn't even mean anything, then ironically, you will tend not to meet those either because you don't even care. Set them high enough that you'll feel good if you achieve them, but not so high that they're going to be a real stretch for you to get. Just high enough that you'll feel good if you achieve them. And think about them as you're setting them. Will I feel good if I've achieved this? For example, 40 minutes of Italian a day for the next 2 months. Will you feel good if you've achieved that? If not, set it a bit higher. If you think that's too much and you won't get there at all, set it a bit lower. I also want to say, at the risk of sounding ridiculously hippie and more Deepak Chopra-ish than I really wish to sound, but I mean this in the truest sense, acknowledge who you are. I got the idea for this video when I saw one by Lindy Boats. I'm not sure how you say her last name, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with her. She's a really cool language vlogger, and she speaks tons of languages. She grew up bilingual, maybe even trilingual, I'm not sure. She's lived in a ton of different countries, so she speaks a lot of languages. She's also very diligent in her studies. She says, I'm going to do this week, I'm going to do this week. She has gotten to the level she's gotten to by applying these kinds of principles, right? And I saw her video saying that next year she would be working on 12 languages to try and build those levels up. And I was like, whoa, I don't know about you, but I see stuff like that and I want to set my goals really high. I want to say, well, maybe I can not only start 1 new language next year, but 2, because then by the end of that year, I'll speak 4 new languages. And it's just not true. I am not Lindy. I am not Luca Lampariello. I am me. I only speak French and Swedish. And that's the thing. Acknowledging that you are you is quite freeing, because when I say I only speak French and Swedish, I'm Australian. Most Australians find it incredible that I would speak 1 foreign language that I've learned as an adult, let alone 2. And even though I know I don't speak either of those languages perfectly, again, most Australians find it incredible that I can even have a conversation in those languages, let alone spell and do things with grammar. I don't know, speak with grammar, I guess. You are you might sound dumb, but it's extremely freeing. You are not someone else. Your goals should be yours. If they're going to be good for you to achieve, if they're going to help you, if they're going to make you feel proud, then they are worth having. So what you can go away from this video with is the first and absolutely most important thing. I cannot stress this enough. Have time or task or both based goals, right? Certain amounts of time on the language within the day, within the week, within the month. Certain tasks on the language within the day, within the week, within the month. Not fluency goals, okay? Fluency goals don't mean anything. They're not allowed because you cannot directly affect them. You can only affect what you do and how much of it you do. The other thing is, do not beat yourself up if you do not meet them, particularly if you set them quite high. Some of you will know that 58 days ago, I think, I set a goal of 250 hours of French in the remainder of the year, which was 98 days. Now, if you're good at maths, you don't have to be that good at maths, you know that that's more than 2.5 hours a day. That's a lot. I have not hit that. But that's okay, because the other day I worked out how much I have hit. I've hit 2.2 hours a day of French since I set that goal. That's still a lot, yeah? I'm not beating myself up for not hitting the 2.5 hours a day because I know that I set that very, very high. I have still done a lot, and that is what goals are about. They're not binary, right? Binary means either one thing or the other, like a computer, 1 or 0. Whereas goals are not like that. You can partially achieve a goal. And if you do partially achieve a goal, it's probably a good sign, because it probably means that you set the goal just a little bit too high. Just a little bit, which is good, because it means that you did more than you would have done otherwise. If you set, say, 60 hours of German in the remainder of the year, that's high. If you only hit 40 hours, you didn't fail. You did 40 hours of German. And here's a little bonus thing that you can do if that has happened to you, or if that does happen to you. You can then say, well, I'm now going to do the 60 hours anyway. Okay, I didn't do it within the time frame that I was hoping to, but I can still do 60 hours of German. And remember, when setting your goals, only compare them with yourself and what you can currently do and what you can currently achieve. You want to be a better version of yourself, right? You want to get to a stage that's better than you are currently at. You don't want to be any other version of anyone else. Like I said before, I am not Lindy Boats. I am not Luca Lampriello. I am not Steve Kaufman. I am me, and I can only work on being better than that. And I want you to do the same. You can work on doing your languages better, speaking your languages better, speaking more languages. Maybe you want to take up a new one. Whatever it is, you can be a better version of yourself. So set your goals that are humbly lofty or loftily humble, however you want to think about it, just higher than you currently are. Just that little bit. It's going to be a strain, but it's not going to be impossible. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. If you did and you're new here, then consider subscribing. Very soon you should be seeing a video from me about what my language learning goals for 2020, my humbly lofty or loftily humble goals for 2020, and why I've set them that and as that and how I've set them. And yeah, I'll be seeing you soon with that video. Thanks for watching. See you next time.